Knowing what we do about both the cognitive and learning side, as well as the social and emotional side of learning disabilities, it's important for teachers to be able to take proper approaches for students with learning disabilities to be successful in school, and not just within the school classroom itself, but within the school as a whole, knowing that the learning disability will not just present itself in the classroom, but socially as well. Teachers and school staff need to be able to bridge those disabilities and be on the lookout for those students and help where possible. One of the first factors in approaching students with learning disabilities is really to examine your own beliefs about learning disabilities and students that have them. When I came out of my first year in school, I was really not too sure how I would handle a student with a learning disability in my first year, should that present itself. Unfortunately, I was never put in that position, or at least not with a coded learning disability. But it's interesting to think about questions such as, in my own schooling, what has been my attitude about those around me that may have learning disabilities? Is there anybody in my life that has a learning disability, and how do I interact with them if I do similarly or differently than others? I also think it's valuable for teachers to consider if they have ever been in a spot in their life where an activity or learning was happening that did not meet their needs as a learner, and how they struggled with it and how they managed to overcome it. I know for myself, following visual instructions is not a strength for me whatsoever, and I get very easily frustrated. So when I'm dealing with a student with an exceptionality or a learning disability, I try to think back to what it feels like for me to be looking at those picture instructions and feel like I absolutely cannot do it. When you question yourself, you give yourself the opportunity to identify in ways that your personal beliefs and experiences are going to inform your daily practice. And that could be positively, and that can be negatively. So I think it's always important to check your own beliefs and try to have a gauge or a reminder for yourself on what that student may be feeling and what that student may be experiencing. I believe dealing with learning disabilities can be difficult for teachers, especially if they're unsupported, which it feels like is happening more and more, especially in the younger grades. But I believe all teachers have a real empathetic side, so if they can really feel for that student, that everybody benefits. The second thing is to become informed. There is a lot of discrepancy in what learning disabilities are and what they are not. And even within sections of learning disabilities, there is a lot to know. For teachers in their first couple of years, in their survival years, they probably will not be able to research very much about the learning disabilities that are presented to them. However, if as a teacher you are aware that a specific learning disability is going to be present in your classroom, it would do everybody so much favor to read academic articles, read books on that learning disability, so that you can understand exactly what the learner is faced with and how you can best accommodate for that learner. The next thing to do is to work with the school team, the parents, and the student. While things in the family may be different and approached differently, it's still important for the student to see everybody as a team. All students benefit from continuity between home and school, and strategies that may be being worked on with a special education teacher who may be more knowledgeable, or strategies that the parents have used at home in the past may be all valuable to everybody. So the more that the school team that deals with the student, the parent, and the student themselves are involved in the process, the better the end result for the student. Experiences for any student that are fragmented are not as beneficial as those that flow smoothly, regardless of their position at home or school. Success for students with disabilities is going to happen as a team. Students with learning disabilities often present with complex learning sometimes behavioral and sometimes physical needs. Planning and implementing with other teachers and school supports works best when it's done collaboratively. You might reference a school's resource teacher, board personnel, parents, and other professionals such as speech and language pathologists to develop the best programming for a student. It's really important to include students in their own decision making. They need to have their own voice and they need to feel that they have power behind their education. Because of the difficulties that students with disabilities will face, they can often feel disempowered when the adults are making all the decisions for them, when truly they may have already come to a point where they understand their learning disability and they know what they need to be successful. It's really important that teachers take some time to discuss with the students what works best for their learning and to identify what supports they might need. A next really critical piece is to use a variety of teaching strategies. And I have heard many people say that nothing makes up for great quality teaching. A teacher that is present and aware and has the knowledge that they need will always do an excellent job, a far superior job to any standard programming. But when you're doing your programming for students with learning disabilities, consider using a variety of instructional methods that can incorporate the differentiated instruction and universal design principles for learning. These don't just benefit students with disabilities, but benefit all students. When programming, don't just think about differentiated learning and universal design for learning, but think also about just the physical space of your classroom. What kind of stimulus is happening there? I often think about the amount of noise coming in or where noise is coming from, what is seen, what can't be seen, and generally how the classroom looks. Is it cold, extremely bright? Is there things about the desks that may worry somebody with a learning disability or cause anxiety for them? Try to see the environment from a number of different perspectives. One of the best exercises I did as a teacher was to have my colleagues come into my classroom and tell me what they honestly thought. It gave me many different perspectives and allowed me to change the structure of my classroom often to meet the needs of more students. Some students will function better on their own, some in small groups, some in larger groups. And so I always tried to change to allow for accommodations for all students and to sometimes even change within a certain structure in case that was a way that a student might learn best. Besides knowing your own beliefs and being educated on the learning disability, working within school teams, parent teams, and even with the student, as well as using teaching strategies within your class, it's important to consider the difficulty that a student with a learning disability will encounter both inside and outside the classroom. I think sometimes as teachers we believe that most of what we do happens within the four walls of our classroom, but really a student with a learning disability may encounter difficulty throughout their school day. Keeping a student with a learning disability included isn't just about programming for them academically. It's going to occur throughout the school. Staff, parents, and the students themselves need to be successful in an environment that's inclusive and that works well for all students, not just your average mainstream student and not just your student with a learning disability.